You know what's frustrating? You sit down to read something important, a book, an article, something you actually care about, and your eyes move across every single word. You finish the page, you even finish the chapter, and then you realize you have absolutely no idea what you just read, like your brain was somewhere else the entire time while your eyes were just going through the motions. If this happens to you constantly, you're not stupid and you're not broken. There's actual psychology behind why some people can read without absorbing anything. Here's the thing that'll mess with you. Reading and comprehension are two completely different brain processes. Your eyes can decode words perfectly fine. That's the mechanical part. But absorption, actually taking in meaning and storing it, that requires something else entirely. It requires your brain to be present, not just your eyeballs. And for a lot of people, their brain checked out years ago. But before we dive in, if you're enjoying this exploration of human behavior, consider subscribing to Mura Psychology for more insights into the psychology that shapes who you are. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you read something and actually remembered it the next day? Now think about how many times you've read the same paragraph 3 times in a row because nothing stuck. That gap tells you everything. According to research published in the journal Cognition, when people read while their mind is preoccupied with stress or anxiety, their retention drops by up to 50%. Your brain literally cannot encode new information when it's busy running threat assessment in the background. So you're reading, but your mental RAM is maxed out on other stuff. The first trait you'll notice in people who read but can't absorb is chronic mental overload. Their brain is always juggling 15 things at once. They sit down to read, but part of their mind is replaying an argument from yesterday, another part is planning tomorrow's schedule, another part is worrying about that weird text someone sent, and maybe 10% is actually available for the words on the page. Psychologists call this cognitive load theory. When your working memory is overwhelmed, new information just bounces off. It's like trying to pour water into a cup that's already full. The water doesn't go in, it just spills everywhere, and you're left wondering why you can't remember a single thing you just read. Here's what's wild. These people often read a lot. They're not avoiding books or articles. They're consuming tons of content, but it's surface-level consumption. They finish books and retain almost nothing because their brain was never fully engaged. Its reading is a mechanical act, not a mental one. And the frustration builds because they know they're intelligent, they know they should be able to do this, but something's blocking the connection between seeing words and actually understanding them. The second trait is what researchers call attentional fragmentation. This is when your attention has been trained to jump constantly. Think about how you use your phone. You read 2 sentences of an article, check a notification, read 3 more sentences, switch apps, come back, scroll, read a bit more. Your brain has learned to operate in bursts. Sustained focus feels almost physically uncomfortable now. Dr. Gloria Mark at UC Irvine found that the average person switches tasks every 3 minutes. 3 minutes! Your brain doesn't have time to settle into anything before it's yanked somewhere else.
So when you sit down to read a book, something that requires 20, 30, maybe 60 minutes of continuous attention, your brain doesn't know what to do. It starts getting restless, it creates distractions, your mind wanders, you think about checking your phone, you notice you're thirsty, you remember something you need to do later, anything to break the monotony of sustained focus. This isn't lack of discipline, this is your brain operating exactly how it's been trained to operate, in fragments, in bursts, never staying anywhere long enough to go deep. The third trait is reading as escapism rather than engagement. A lot of people read to avoid their thoughts, not to absorb new ones. They're running from something, anxiety, boredom, loneliness, so they use reading as white noise, the same way some people leave the TV on in the background. The words are there, moving past their eyes, creating the illusion of productivity or self-improvement. But there's no real intention to retain anything. It's just a way to fill time and quiet the mind. Psychologically, this creates a weird loop. They feel bad about not absorbing what they read, so they read more to compensate. But since they're reading to escape rather than engage, nothing sticks, and the cycle continues. Researchers studying reading motivation have found that when people read primarily to avoid negative emotions rather than to gain knowledge, comprehension drops significantly. Your brain knows when you're being genuine and when you're just going through the motions, and it responds accordingly. The fourth trait is undiagnosed processing issues, or ADHD. For some people, the problem isn't effort or intention, it's neurological. ADHD doesn't just make you hyper or distracted, it affects how your brain processes and stores information. People with ADHD can read the same sentence 5 times and still not absorb it because their working memory is impaired. The information goes in, but it doesn't stick around long enough to transfer to long-term storage. There's also something called auditory processing disorder, where the brain struggles to make sense of information even when it's being received. Reading requires your brain to convert visual symbols into meaning, and if that conversion process is inefficient, comprehension suffers. These aren't character flaws, they're differences in brain wiring. And the tragedy is that people spend years thinking they're just bad at reading, when really, their brain needs a different approach. Audiobooks, for example, work better for some people because they bypass the visual processing struggle. But society tells you that reading means eyes on a page, so people keep forcing a method that doesn't work for them. The fifth trait is emotional disconnection from the material. Here's something nobody talks about. If you don't care about what you're reading, your brain won't bother remembering it. Sounds obvious, but think about how much we read out of obligation. For work, for school, because someone recommended it, because we think we should. Your brain is smart. It knows when something matters to you and when you're just pretending, and it allocates resources accordingly.
Studies on memory and emotion show that information tied to emotional significance gets encoded much more deeply than neutral information. If you're reading something that genuinely interests you, that challenges you, that makes you feel something, you'll remember it. But if you're slogging through a book because it's on some must-read list, your brain is barely paying attention. It's like the difference between a conversation with someone you find fascinating versus small talk with a stranger. One sticks, the other evaporates the second it's over. Understanding these traits reveals something important. The inability to absorb what you read isn't about intelligence, it's about your brain's current state, how it's been trained, what it's carrying, and whether it's actually engaged with the material. You can have a genius-level IQ and still read an entire book without retaining a single idea if your nervous system is fried and your attention is shattered. Research on reading comprehension shows that the modern environment is uniquely hostile to deep reading. Nicholas Carr wrote an entire book called The Shallows about how the internet is rewiring our brains for skimming rather than deep focus. MRI studies show that people who frequently multitask online show less density in the anterior cingulate cortex, the part of the brain responsible for cognitive and emotional control. We're not getting worse at reading because we're dumb. We're getting worse because our brains are adapting to an environment that rewards rapid task switching over sustained attention. Historically, people read differently. Before electric light, before constant stimulation, reading was one of the few mentally engaging activities available. People would read by candlelight for hours, fully absorbed, because there was nothing else competing for their attention. Now, even when you're reading a physical book, your brain knows your phone is 3 feet away with infinite stimulation waiting. That knowledge alone fragments your focus. So what do you do if you're someone who reads but can't absorb? First, stop blaming yourself. Your brain isn't defective, it's responding to the conditions it's operating under. Second, audit your mental state before you read. Are you stressed, tired, distracted? If yes, don't force it. You'll just reinforce the pattern of reading without absorbing. Third, reduce the friction. Start with shorter pieces. Give yourself permission to read slowly. Put your phone in another room. Create actual space for your brain to settle in. And here's the thing nobody wants to hear. Sometimes the solution isn't reading more, it's reading less with actual presence. 5 pages fully absorbed beats 50 pages skimmed and forgotten. Quality over quantity isn't just a cliche, it's how memory actually works. The next time you catch yourself reading without absorbing, pause. Don't keep going. Stop. Ask yourself what's actually happening in your mind right now. Is it racing? Is it elsewhere? That awareness is the first step, because you can't fix a problem you don't notice, and most people are so used to operating on autopilot that they don't even realize their brain left the building until the chapter's over and they remember nothing. If this hit home for you, take a moment to reflect. When was the last time you read something and actually felt it land? What was different about that moment? That's your clue to what your brain needs. And if you're enjoying this exploration, please subscribe to Mura Psychology. We explore the psychology that makes you who you are. Remember, reading without absorbing isn't failure, it's information. Information about what your brain is dealing with, how it's been trained, and what it actually needs. Listen to that information. Your brain is trying to tell you something. And sometimes the answer isn't to read harder, it's to live differently, so reading can actually happen.